Administrator and Mounds Midway School of Nursing Board member. Today is Thursday, April 21st, 1994, in the Mounds Midway Historical Museum room at Midway Hospital, Health East. Gina Schottmuller is the cam recorder. Lucille Walter Reed, class of 1943, is the chairman of the video committee. And Eleanor Anderson Vogel, me, class of 1950. I will be the interviewer of Mel Conley. We really are pleased to have this opportunity to hear you tell of your remembrances of your career in association with our Mounds Midway School of Nursing. The following areas are just a few of the questions that I gave to Melvin. We will look at your life and know how you chose your profession, your many roles at Midway and Mounds Park Hospitals, your connection to the Mounds Midway School of Nursing, your significant trends and school changes, some of the school-church relationships, some of the Mounds Midway School and college relationships, and then any other important things. We really are appreciative that you took the time to and were willing to come and share this. And just feel free just to proceed. Once in a while I might interrupt and interject something, but otherwise, Mr. Conley, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. When Eleanor suggested I indicate how I got involved in the profession of hospital administration, I guess I would have to admit that it was just being at the right place at the right time. At the time that World War II started, I was a junior at the University of Minnesota in business administration. And at the request of the government, I joined the Army in the fall of 1942. And after a brief spell at Fort Snelling, I was transferred to Stanford University in Palo Alto, California, in a program called Army Specialized Training Program. And I was assigned to a personnel psychology course there and spent 2 semesters at Stanford. And following that, I was transferred to the Army Air Force and was put into the program called the Medical and Psychological Research Program, which had the responsibility for testing cadets that were planning to go into either pilot, bombardier, or navigator training. And I spent the balance of my time until February of 1946 doing that. When I came back to Minnesota after the war, I had 2 choices. One was to either go back to school and finish out my work at the university, or after 3.5 years with the Army and their low pay system, and I had a wife to support, was to find a job. And because it was the middle of the winter quarter at the university, I ruled that out, and I had the opportunity to become associated with the Baptist Hospital Fund, which at that time was called the Northwestern Baptist Hospital Association, and Art Calvin was the receiver. The corporation was in receiver at that time, receivership. My first title and responsibility was as auditor for the corporation. And I officed at Midway Hospital, and there were 4 people in the office, including myself, 1 stenographer, 1 bookkeeper, and a collector. And the responsibilities were to develop the financial reports for the corporation for both Mounds Park and Midway, the payroll for Midway Hospital, the accounts payable for both of the hospitals, and also the collections of patients' accounts for both hospitals. And as I said, there were only 4 of us in the office at that time. Well, over a period of time, I attended all of the board meetings at that time, worked with the receivership, and with the Baptist Hospital Fund, which was a separate corporation that had been formed in 1935, and Arthur Calvin was the receiver. And the Baptist Hospital Fund was responsible for raising the funds for dormitory at Mounds Park, the Mary Danielson Hall, the dormitory here at Midway 1709 Shields, and eventually the construction of the new dormitory at 425 Haldane. And over a period of time, that corporation actually owned the dormitories and rented them to the receiver. In 1956, the receivership was terminated and the two corporations merged, and the Baptist Hospital Fund became the ongoing name of the two corporations. Over a period of several years, my responsibilities in the corporation and my titles changed. I was named the business manager, then the director, then the executive director, and then the president and chief executive officer of the Baptist Hospital, and for a time I even held the title of administrator of Midway Hospital.
Well, sometimes when a person interviews somebody, it's good to take a little break or a breather. And so, Mel, I'd like to ask you, because I'm curious about where you were born and where you grew up, because I think this is significant as we look at our Mounds Midway School of Nursing. We have served nurses from Minnesota, in Iowa, and the Dakotas, and further away. And so our roots are very important to history. So where did you come from?
Well, I was born in Hamley Falls, which is a small town in western Minnesota. My father worked for the railroad, and he was the station agent. And we moved to St. Louis Park, well, first to Kilkenny, and then to St. Louis Park. So from the time I was in 4th grade on up, I had my schooling in St. Louis Park. I graduated from St. Louis Park High School and into the university from there. But my involvement with the school, my personal involvement with the School of Nursing didn't begin until 1946. But in reviewing the minutes of the board going back to 1907 when Mounds Park Sanitarium was started, it was very evident that they were interested in nursing education because they started the school the same day that they opened the hospital. And both Dr. Robert Earl and at that time and Dr. George a little later were instrumental in maintaining that educational interest over the years.
And what was the name of the man on the east side, the Nelson?
Nels Lindahl was the man who originally had the idea for Mounds Park Hospital, but unfortunately he passed away before the hospital was built, and so Robert Earl carried the load of not only a good part of the design of the hospital, but also the fundraising and the construction went on. One little sidelight about Dr. Robert, when we were doing some work at Mounds Park Hospital and the remodeling of the old building, I looked at the original plans for the building, and he had on the 4th floor of Mounds Park Hospital a recovery room. And
really?
And it was marked on the plans, and it wasn't until sometime after I came here, maybe about 1950, that this room that we're in today became our recovery room. But he had the vision that far back of having a recovery room in the hospital. Man,
really ahead of his time.
He really was. It was an interesting thing when you noticed that he had that actually written into the plans back in 1907. I think I mentioned previously that when I became associated with the corporation in 1946, the receiver, the Northwestern Baptist Hospital Association was in receivership, and Art Calvin was appointed the receiver by the court. And the Baptist Hospital Fund, which is the corporate name that we were known as later, came into being in 1935 as a vehicle to help Arthur Calvin raise funds for the hospital and served as an advisory board during the time the hospital was in receivership. And the receivership did not end until 1956. And at that time, the two corporations, as I think I mentioned before, were merged. The Baptist Hospital Fund was the ongoing name.
Can you just kind of clarify what receivership means?
Well, at the time, Midway Hospital was built in 1926. Money that was raised to build the hospital was in the form of bonds that were sold to Baptist families over a several state area. And the idea was that as the hospital prospered, they would use the money from income from patients to pay off the bonds and redeem the debt. Unfortunately, the Depression that came along in 1928 prevented that. And so they had no way of paying off. They had a lot of people coming to the hospital. They had no money to pay for it, that they cared for them. And so they were unable to repay the debt as it came due. And so some of the bondholders requested a friendly receivership. And Art Calvin, who was the administrator of the corporation at that time, was appointed a friendly receiver and was under the jurisdiction of the Ramsey County Court until 1956, when the indebtedness was paid off and the corporations merged.
And this is interesting because, again, history usually is flavored so much by what is happening politically, and like the Depression really affects hospitals, schools of nursing, and people or institutions. And this was a very significant thing in our past history.
Actually, the hospitals were in receivership from 1933 to 1956, so it was a significant period of time before they were able to work out of their indebtedness and regain control and return the hospital back to a full operating board. But getting back again to the School of Nursing, in 1948 there was a study done by a Dr. Esther Lucille Brown on the School of Nursing and what was the trend, and it was her feeling that the diploma schools operated by a hospital should be gradually phased out and the education process be turned over to educational institutions. And so that was one of the early times that the board started considering whether or not it would be wise to continue the School of Nursing. And there was a study that was done in 1958 by Hamilton Associates in Minneapolis for the Baptist Hospital Fund on the future of the school and the hospitals. And it was their feeling in their report that either the school should be turned over to an educational institution such as Bethel or Sioux Falls College, or it should be closed. That the trend in nursing education was away from diploma schools to baccalaureate schools. And following that, there were meetings that took place with Sioux Falls College and representatives of the American Baptist Convention as to whether or not some association could be made with Sioux Falls.
I would like to interject. One of the important things out of some of these studies was that looking at the tax base of payment for the education, it was felt that well people should pay for education rather than the few sick people in the hospital for education. And that was the trend in all of education. And so that was one of the big factors, in addition to the academia level of expertise of teachers. But I think when you understand that, and secondly, and quite importantly, one of the reasons we did not move rapidly, like into the Associate of Arts or the 2-year or the 4-year, which was talked about by Dr. Brown, was because we did not have a lot of junior colleges here in the Midwest, like out in California, in other places where it really took off. Some of the suggestions.
Part of the discussion that the committee had at that time was whether or not they should go towards a 2-year program or a 4-year program. And the feeling of the people that were involved in the consideration from the American Baptist Convention and also from some of the colleges we talked to, felt that the program at Mounds Midway was closer to a baccalaureate program than it was to a degree program, or an AA program. And so they recommended that you not consider a AA or a two-year program because it just was not felt in keeping with the trend that was happening in education, and also the background of the school was more geared towards an educational type institution. And in 1958, then, was when we determined that part of the curriculum would be taught by faculty members of the college, and the school actually became a part of Hamlin University. It was the Mounds Midway division of the Hamlin University School of Nursing. And that was, I guess, 1958 or roughly about there. And baccalaureate program at Hamlin, they had actually three programs at the time. They had a baccalaureate program, they had the Asbury division of the Hamlin School of Nursing and the Mounds Midway program. And our students actually enrolled in Hamlin for the first 6 months of their program and then came to the hospitals for their clinical experience. So that's another little sidelight.
I think it also would. Mel, would you go through again the years or the dates of our merger with Hamlin School of Nursing?
I think the school, correct the time, the statement I made earlier was in 1949 that we merged with Hamlin University. And the last class of the Mounds Midway unit of Hamlin University graduated in 1960. However, in 1958, the board assumed responsibility for the School of Nursing admissions again, and it was set up in such a way that the class that started at Midway in 58 would graduate in 1961, and the last class and that would be after the last class had graduated from Hamlin University, so that should be correct.
Okay, fine.
Then in 1965, there was a committee that from the board and Sioux Falls College that discussed with them the possibility of having a baccalaureate program at Sioux Falls. And those discussions went on for several months, and it was eventually determined that the problem with having a faculty is had to be on the campus in Sioux Falls, and the faculty that had to be here and the control of the school, it made it impractical for a relationship with Sioux Falls College as far as a baccalaureate program.
And this would have been extremely costly when you think in terms of both students and faculty.
Yes. And I think following that, then discussions occurred, rather, I should say, with Bethel College as to whether or not they would be interested in starting a baccalaureate program. And those discussions continued on over a period of years, and both the faculty at Bethel and the faculty of the School of Nursing had meetings and discussed what might be a possibility. And actually, the committee of the faculty of the Mounds Midway School of Nursing made a recommendation to the Baptist Hospital Fund Board that they enter into a program with Bethel. And that was the beginning of the Bethel School of Nursing and the end of the Mounds Midway School of Nursing as such.
Mel, we had a Mounds Midway School of Nursing committee, and it would be interesting if you could just identify some of the people that have served on this committee and briefly tell the purpose of the committee.
Well, during the time that I was involved with the hospital, the board of trustees of the Baptist Hospital Fund had several committees, one of which was the School of Nursing Committee. And there would always be 4 or 5 or 6 members of the board that served on that committee, and they would respond to the approval of the budget that was submitted by the director of the school, the allocation of funds to supplement that budget coming from patient income, and generally be a supportive, in a supportive role to the director. And during the time that I was associated with the corporation, and it would only be from 1946 to the time I retired, there were a great number of people that served, and many of those people I think will be remembered as active people from the Baptist community and from the business community of St. Paul. But Dr. Curtis Atkinson, Dr. Elving Anderson, Carl Lundquist, Dr. George Earle, Dr. John Earle, Herbert Elston, Dick Fast, Henry Fluth, Richard Gunderson, Ella Mears Hugh, and James Lewis, Marjorie Nygren, Mercedes Murphy, Dr. Clifford Perrin, Dr. Lloyd Short, and Chester Stone and Donald Turnquist were all members at one time or another during that 40-year period of the School of Nursing Committee. And it really was a pleasure to have an opportunity to work with people like that, of that caliber, and to see the support that they gave to the programs, not only at the hospital, but of the School of Nursing.
And it's interesting, and I'm just going to pull out three people, Dr. Curtis Atkinson and Dr. Carl Lundquist and Dr. Elving Anderson were real leaders in education. So I think we in the Mounds Midway School of Nursing benefited by some of the people that were really aware of trends in total education. So that I think this is another reason why the Mounds Midway School has always kept high in academia.
I think that's right, and you probably know from that group that two of them were college presidents at one time or another, and Dr. Lord Short was a member of the faculty at the University of Minnesota, and so we had people who were actively involved in education, serving on the committees. And maybe in the closing remarks, I think there are many people that should be recognized as not only faculty members, but also graduates of the School of Nursing that I had an opportunity to work with that really made it a joy to be part of the organization. And I think there are two people I can think of. Dr. Horace Wood was our first Director of Development, and he was instrumental in not only raising funds for the School of Nursing, but helping recruit students from a wide state area. He was involved, I think, from about 1956 or so to, can't remember the exact date, but following him was Reverend Gordon Smith, and he served as a Director of Development after Horace retired, and eventually he was given the title of Director of Education and Development for the Baptist Hospital Fund, and actually worked directly with the school executive directors, and was a very important part of the ongoing corporation staff. I think the school and the Baptist Hospital Fund also owes a debt of gratitude to Adela Bennett Espelin for her undertaking to record the history of the school from the start in 1907 until I believe it was 1967, and she did a commendable service to the organization in recording the history during that period of time. Part of the stated purpose of the Baptist Hospital Fund in organizing or offering an educational program was to provide, I'll read this, a strategic opportunity for service to society on the part of Christian young women, and to offer them a program of education which combines accepted standards of academia and practical achievement with Christian ideals of devotion and vocation. And in my opinion, the program that was, and the graduates were a tribute to that part of the motivation of having the School of Nursing. And I think during the time that I was associated with the hospital, many of the staff members were graduates of the school. And I think we had an excellent reputation for providing good care, and I think it was because of the quality of the students that were recruited to become the students in the school.
Thank you so much, Mel. Um, and I would like to say thanks for your many contributions, both to Baptist Hospital Foundations, but also to our Mounts Midway School of Nursing. I know it involved things like funding, tuition, numbers of students coming in, um, support to faculty, especially directors, and um, just the leadership and awareness of trends in our community and our needs. And I think you can take part in knowing that many of our Mounts Midway School of Nursing nurses have touched almost every country of the world, in missionaries, in people like this year in 1994. We are especially honoring our nurses who have been in the war or served in our country, and even other people who have served in civilian hospitals. We also have many people who have written books, have taught, and most important, have rendered quality nursing care at the bedside in a spiritual way. Again, I say thank you from our Mounts Midway School of Nursing alumni.
Well, maybe I could take just this opportunity also to thank the School of Nursing for making me an honorary member of the School of Nursing alumni. Even though I know nothing about nursing education and nursing care as such, it was a real honor and I appreciate it very much. It was very thoughtful and thankful.
You are welcome. And now we would like, and again, I'm holding in my hands one of the cadet caps and then the dogtail tags from Beatrice Bennett. And then to my right is a white negligee made out of a parachute by Filipino seamstresses that has been contributed to our museum. We really thank everyone who has contributed to our museum.
Want to say anything about the uniforms, Eleanor?
But
You know anything about these uniforms that we should say while we're recording today?
they're cadet uniforms, but I can't identify
Okay.
which is Navy and the tan is Army, and I can't tell you.
Okay. They did a fine job displaying them, didn't they?
Yeah.
I think this room is so beautiful, I just wanted to get another shot at it before we put the video away.